Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, Everest on edge. Will the mountain's deadliest day lead to improved conditions for local guides? Well, the stream team as normal is me and digital producer Malika Bilal, but also we have Pasang Kaji Sherpa. She is a lecturer and doctor in anthropology at Penn State University. She examines lots of indigenous communities. I want to ask you, Pasang, first of all, Malika and I discovered something for the first time just in the last week, that Sherpa is not just somebody who goes up the mountain as a guide.
No.
There's much more to that word. It's a community.
Yes, and Sherpa is actually the term or the name of our ethnic community, and the people who used to climb mountains and who used to work on the mountains, they used to be mostly Sherpas in the past, and that's how the term is now being synonymously used for those kinds of jobs. But today, even expedition works or any kinds of other portering jobs are not only done by Sherpas, but people from other ethnic groups too. So Sherpa, the word itself, refers to the ethnic community I belong to.
As well as a job too. So you'll hear more from Pasang in just a moment, more from Malika Bilal right now.
Right, and more from our community, of course. Now, for those of you who are at home, you can follow this conversation using the hashtag AJStream. And while you're at it, you can tell us what stories you're following, like these people did.
Standing on top of the world, it's a dream for many, but for the few men and women who chase it, scaling Mount Everest can turn into a nightmare. The world's highest mountain claimed 16 lives last month when a column of glacial ice toppled into an avalanche down the Kathmandu icefall. It buried guides who were fixing ropes and prepping camps for paying clients who would follow behind. Now, those climbers had to abandon their trip because many local guides have turned their mourning period into a boycott. They're hoping the tactic will bring better working conditions and a greater share of the multi-million-dollar adventure industry built on the backs of their labour. So, can Everest's deadliest accident actually improve the lives of local guides? Joining us to help us talk about this, we have in Kathmandu, Ang Kaji Sherpa, president of the Nepal Mountain Guide Association. Sumit Joshi is an Everest guide and owner of Himalayan Ascent. Ang Kaji Sherpa is Nepal's former Minister of Tourism, and in Colorado, climber Arnott, who's scaled Everest 4 times, reaching the summit once. So Alan, let me start off with you. Mount Everest has now become a tourist attraction, but take us onto the mountain, take us into a climb and give us a sense of what that experience is like. You've done it 4 times, but only got to the summit just once. That means it must be pretty hard, right?
Well, absolutely. It's a total test of your physical and your mental toughness. It's a long expedition, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks actually on the mountain, going up and down the mountain to acclimatize your body to the ever-lessening amount of oxygen that's available. So it's a very physical endeavor. It takes a lot of focus to stay on your goal of what you're trying to do. But also it's just an unbelievable opportunity to experience the camaraderie of your teammates, and most importantly is to get exposed to a whole different culture around the world for most Americans or most people outside of that part of the world, and getting to know the Sherpa. And I still have great friends that I climbed with, and I hope to climb with them again in the future.
Are you aware of what your guides are doing, how much effort they're putting in, the kind of working conditions that they're experiencing, or are you just so focused on getting up to the next step in your expedition?
No, absolutely, totally aware of it. For example, when you get up to the 23,500 feet on the Lhotse face, and you see these tents that have been carved out of the slope on the Lhotse face, and you see these level tent platforms, you know, that didn't happen by itself. That happened out of the hard work of the Sherpa that were up ahead of us, that carried the tents up there, they carried the oxygen bottles up there, they carved the platforms out. You know, I always say this, that I'm very proud that I was able to summit Everest at age 54, but I'm also very proud to say that I would not have summited if it hadn't been for the help and the guidance of the Sherpa I climbed with, Kaji Sherpa, with IMG.
Sumit, what are the working conditions like for your guides on Mount Everest?
The working conditions, I guess, as good, if not the better, with considering many other the guiding outfits they are in the local guiding outfits. Yeah.
What does that mean?
But yeah,
what do
could be improved. Like
take us through. Is there such a thing as a typical day on Mount Everest for a guide?
The typical day in the beginning is basically just getting the loads up. You know, that's when that's the phase we were in this year. Like most of the team had just started to get their very, very basic equipments up to Camp 1 and 2, like the tents and the fuel, and that's the reason that there was none of the clients or climbers had started to go up.
Right.
So, yeah.
You know, Femi, in talking of preparedness and what it takes, you asked that question. There's some skepticism online about what some climbers may go into this thinking. So Akash on Twitter writes, climbing Everest doesn't seem to be the challenge it once was. Present-day climbers are looking for a fun vacation, Akash says, rather than any real sense of adventure, so they can have a sense of achievement, with the real risks being borne by their guides, the Sherpas. Pemba, as a guide yourself, do you think that this rings true for some of the people that you help guide up the mountain?
Yeah, but you know, climbing Mount Everest is not really easy activities, because this is the highest mountain in the world and also a very spiritual mountain, and every people, they need well prepared for climbing this mountain if they want to climb safely, you know. And we cannot underestimate the mountain, because this is the top mountain. This is the top mountain, topographically, you know, environmentally. This is the top mountain. Then we need very, very good preparation, well prepared. Not only guide, even clients, we need a well preparations for climbing this mountain.
So Prasang, this is your community that's been really desperately affected, and it's really changed. It's changed an entire climbing season. People aren't climbing right now. They could be, but they're just not climbing. In terms of what's happened to your community, how would you sum it up?
I think, first of all, before I even say anything, I think it's very important for me to point out that this is a very sad time. It is the community as a whole has lost 16 lives, and so this is a sad time not only for us, but also especially for the families and the children who are going through all of this. And so the first reaction is sadness, but the second one is frustration, which is what I believe we're going to be talking about next.
Go ahead.
Frustration about how every time, every year something like this happens, and then deaths or injury on the mountain is inevitable, and every year the expedition workers have to are not compensated enough, according to what I hear from people.
So Sumit, this is very close to you out of all of the guests that we have on today's program. So take me back to April the 18th, which is when this avalanche happened, and how you heard about it.
I just happened to be that day, that morning. I left that evening to go down the valley, just a couple of hours down. So I was, I got informed by a phone call half an hour after it happened. That's how I was informed. Yeah. So.
And there's more than just someone telling you that this happened, because part of your crew were affected by this avalanche. Can you explain a little bit more for our international audience?
Yeah, well, on the 17th, I had my group, as well as a few other companies. They all had their puja, which is like the the ceremony we perform before we start, before stepping onto the mountain. So until then, from my team, no one had actually gone across the icefall. So we consult the local lama, and he came up with the date at 17 is the most auspicious day to perform a puja. So I was there with
to
the
perform
big...
what did you say? Perform a what?
It's a puja ceremony.
Yes.
It's an offering ceremony,
Okay.
asking a mountain for the safer passage and for the rest of the expedition.
Right.
Basically asking the mountain for the permission to climb, kind of in a Buddhist tradition, and this local tradition.
Sure.
So we did that on the 17th, and I was there with the big, large trekking group who came for that ceremony as well. So I wish all my guides best of luck, and then just headed down the valley for the night to see them off, see the trekking group off. And just the next morning, I got the phone call from my camp at 7:30 in the morning, saying that this has happened, and we don't know where some of our crews are. So, but we all connected by radio. So
Right. How many people did you, Sumit, how many people did you lose?
I lost 3 in my
Okay.
from my team. Yeah. So.
Okay. And the prospects for their families, what happens to their families?
What happens to that families right now is we're still looking for 2 bodies. Is still uncovered. We haven't been able to locate. So at the moment it's so early. Like everybody is still like shocked. We haven't actually gotten over the whole the shock of the accident. So.
Sure.
We haven't been able to think past certain things. Like we just finished all the all the mourning ceremonies and things like that.
Right.
It still hasn't been finished. So we haven't actually gone past that stage to think about what's next for the family. And but there's so many people. From my 3 people I lost on the mountain, they've got 10 kids between them. So it's a big it's like a big task ahead. Yeah.
Right. And Sumit, you speak of the shock. We're actually hearing from other climbers online. One person, Neil, described a sad and somber day. He was there. He actually reached the base camp on when the avalanche happened. This is Neil tweeting in saying, "I was at meetings where we discussed 13 to 18 changes to be accepted by the ministry, and we're still waiting." Again, Kila, he also shared a picture of one such meeting with government or authorities, presumably. What are some of the changes that people want to see happen?
Are you is this question to me?
It is.
Okay. Can you repeat the question again, please?
What are some of the changes that the community would like to see happen?
Well, first of all, the community as a whole now think that with this incident, it's been a big shock. We've lost 16 important Sherpa climbers, and the foreign media has been very helpful in arousing awareness among the international community especially. And Nepal Mountaineering Association and some of us in the private sector business are working vigorously with the government, trying to get them to address the demands made by the Sherpa climbers and the Sherpa community as a whole also.
What are the Sherpas asking for? What are they asking the government for that they're not getting right now?
Yeah, they are asking better insurance, better, what you call the
insurance coverage? Okay, life insurance?
Yes, life insurance coverage, and the compensation, and I think that's the compensation. What do we call that?
Yeah, that is life insurance compensation. Okay, I understand that. What do you think, Pasang, the likelihood of this is happening? Because you said this happens almost every season.
Yeah.
People get hurt or people are killed almost every season.
Yeah, and so the main issue here and the biggest demands or concerns of the not only the Sherpa community but the expedition workers on the mountains is first of all safer working conditions and better compensation if something like this is were to happen again in the future.
All right, let me just bring in Alan here because I want this to be a realistic conversation. Alan, how do you get safer working conditions on Mount Everest? How's that possible?
Sure, it's certainly possible by avoiding the areas that have that objective danger, such as that ice serac on the west shoulder of Everest. There's talk, and there has been talk. There's been proposals to use helicopters to ferry the gear up into the western cone instead of using Sherpas to carry that gear. That certainly would reduce the number of rotations that the Sherpas go through in that area. In the past, that was rejected by the Ministry of Tourism, but this year there was a big change after this tragic accident that allowed the helicopter companies to carry Sherpa up into the western cone to carry
Alan, can I just,
equipment.
I've only climbed one mountain and it was quite a small mountain, so I'm not much of an expert here, but number of Sherpa rotations, what does that actually mean for the Sherpas and why does that make them safer if they do fewer?
Yeah, so a rotation is just a word for when you go from base camp up into the higher mountain, the higher camps. And there's two reasons for that. One is that for someone like myself is to get my body used to the lower altitude, and my body changes physically in terms of your adjusting to the less oxygen.
Right.
The second reason for a rotation is, as Summit said earlier, is to carry the gear up and to establish the higher camps, camp 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
So someone like me, I'll make anywhere from 4 to 6 trips through the ice fall in a typical expedition.
All right. Okay. So I was just checking in to make sure that the safety was actually possible. Let me, Alan, just take a breath for a moment because I want to go back to Pasang, who was talking about what other conditions would be better for the guide. So safety, and Alan says yes, that is possible. Someone who's been up Mount Everest several times.
And Alan has been one of the people who have been raising awareness about the situation. So I want to personally thank him for that. The second one is better compensation for situations like this one that just happened. When all of this was going on, at the time the families who lost their breadwinners were receiving only around 10,000, or at least the insurance coverage at that time was 10,000 US dollars. And what that means is 5,000 US dollars is going to be used only for the funeral cost, and then the remaining 5,000 is not going to be enough.
For the rest of life, for the rest of their family. Wow. Okay. All right. Let me head back to community before we wrap up the conversation for this part of the show.
Right. Well, in looking for solutions and what to do, we got this video comment from a climber who's actually in Kathmandu. Now, have a listen.
Truth is, the Nepali government only made the situation worse. They should have met with the Sherpas many years ago, determined what their needs were, and met them, versus waiting till an accident like this happened. And then in spite of that, they were very slow in their reactions, and then they were dishonest with the leaders of the expeditions as compared to what they told to the Sherpas from the expeditions.
So again, Kila, you're a former government minister, and you heard criticism there of the current government saying that they should have done something a while ago. Do you have a response to that?
Well, actually, this incident was like ringing a bell, to the government and to everybody, because I think mainly because the media coverage and awareness of the entire Sherpa community regarding our contribution to the expedition and the royalties that the government is earning. Yes, I agree with him to a great extent that the government is not working fast enough, They have made commitments to provide better insurance coverage and a compensation that they have also promised to increase the $400 compensation which they mentioned earlier to now 10 lakhs rupees. But we are asking them to act fast, I'm now talking on behalf of the private sector and Nepal Mountaineering Association. We are working actively together to lobby with the government we are telling them actions are not happening fast enough.
Sure. Pasang.
Yeah, and I agree with the person in the video, and this is what I was talking about when I said frustration early on, because this is something that has been going on for decades since mountaineering became a big thing. I agree with the person in the video.
So, okay, so April the 18th, 16 guides died. It's the most tragic accident that happened on Everest ever. Is this a milestone, Pasang, for the Sherpa community? Is this like, this was the last time ever that anything this terrible happened?
That's my hope. My hope is, and my friends and I, and the entire Sherpa community, we hope that this is going to be the last time something like this happens, right? And that is exactly why we have been talking to the media and trying to raise awareness as much as we can, even though this coming here and talking to you about this tragedy is not easy, but I think this is an important time when we need to just come out and start talking about it.
What's really changed in the last month, less than a month, 2 or 3 weeks? Sumit was just saying it's still so raw, people are still mourning, they can't even think about what next. But what has changed?
Several things. First of all, just like you had asked me earlier, who Sherpas are.
Yeah.
That just the
Awareness
about who Sherpas are, and what our cultural ideals and cultural belief systems are. I think that is
and just
one
what they
thing.
do on the mountain.
Exactly.
That's so amazing. Okay.
And something like this, so the hardships and the working conditions on the mountains, people have been knowing about this, but I think the international community was able to learn more about what actually
and understanding
happens.
it little bit by little bit. So thank you to you, Pasang. Do stay with us, and all of our guests will stay with us. And you can understand a little bit more about what happens on Mount Everest and what the guide community are doing up there in our post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Right now, here's Malika with some of the other stories that we're keeping an eye on.
Our first leads out of Mexico, where netizens are criticizing what they say is cultural appropriation of the Mexican holiday, Cinco de Mayo. Tim tweets, "It's Cinco de Mayo, so please suppress your desire to turn another race and culture into a cartoony stereotype." Well, some criticized Americans for turning the day into a drinking holiday. Shanika says, "White people drinking Coronas and wearing sombreros. Nothing says Cinco de Mayo like racism and cultural appropriation." While others recommended preventing stereotypes by avoiding traditional clothing. Reminder, if you're not Mexican, don't wear sombreros, Mandy writes. Cinco de Mayo, or the 5th of May in Spanish, commemorates the 1862 defeat of French invaders at the Battle of Puebla. Next, South Africans are being cautioned to selfie responsibly. The country's election watchdog says voters are reminded that it is an offense to take and/or publish photographs which reveal a person's vote on a ballot paper. Well, some mocked while others criticized. Nicola says the big issues, no selfies allowed while voting. While Cape Town blogger Odette adds, "When articles like this need to be published, I lose faith in humanity." The offense is punishable by fine or imprisonment up to a year. And lastly, the South African band Freshly Ground has been deported from Zimbabwe. The government hasn't announced a reason, but some speculate their 2010 music video, Chicken to Change, denouncing President Robert Mugabe, played a role. Have a listen. The band published a statement on Facebook confirming its organizers followed all permit requirements. Well, those are the stories we're following. Share your stories with us using hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Thank you, Malika, for putting that song Chicken to Change in my head. I'm going to be singing Chicken to Change all the rest of the day.
Watch the rest of the video, it's great.
Yes, thank you so much. So we are taking Pasang, who is with us in the studio, plus all of our guests, onto the online show. Do you have more questions? Are there more things you want to find out? Hashtag AJStream. That is where to tweet them to as we pick up our conversation about Mount Everest and the local guides on what happens next after a massive avalanche on April the 18th. Now let me tell you very briefly about what we're doing on our next AJStream. We meet 4 journalists who work in places so dangerous that every time they do a story, it might be their last. They join us to share their experiences and why they choose to do it. Until then, thanks for watching. 10 minutes. Hello there, thanks for sticking with us for the online post show. We're talking about the future of Everest. With us we have Pasang Kaji Sherpa, Pemba Gaiji. Did I get that right, Pasang? Gailji, thank you very much. This is why she's here in the studio with me. Sumit Joshi, Yankila Sherpa and Alan Arnott. So I was saying to Pasang, we have 10 minutes left. So we have to use this time really wisely. For our international audience who are joining us online, what do you think is the most critical about the takeaway for this story?
I think it's very important to know what the real issue is, and the real issue is the working conditions and compensation for the expedition workers. And also we need to be very careful to not be confused with Sherpas, the ethnic community, with the Sherpas expedition workers. So this is about expedition workers, and this is about their safety and better compensation for them.
Pemba?
Yeah.
You wanted to add something?
I want to make clear because after the tragedy, there are so many rumors and so many dilemma and so many confusions from the mountains. But the big problem is insurance in our country, especially for the climbers and all mountaineers from Nepal. The insurance standard is very poor. That's why people, they are unhappy for the insurance system.
Sure.
And about the compensation, after the tragedy, about the compensation, if we ask something with the government or someone, I think that is not really important. But we have focus about the insurance system, the standard insurance system we need for all Nepalese local guides or mountain guides or expedition workers, climber, whatever. They need a really, really good insurance. That is the first questions and first demand.
Pemba, what kind of insurance do they need? If they get right now $10,000 US and 5,000 goes to a funeral, so they've got 5,000 left for their family.
Yeah.
What kind of insurance do they need?
We need a very, very good standard insurance. We don't compare with the Western world standard, but we need anyway. We need a very good standard.
Okay.
I think 4 or 5 times better than now.
Right.
I think the number...
I agree with Pemba because apparently from what we heard from the government is like we have the limit on how much you can insure somebody for the life insurance. Like there's a limit, they put a cap on it, so that needs to be obviously either taken off or like increased in a very high. So if a company like someone like me or Yankila Sherpa wants to insure their staff for whatever X amount of dollar or rupees, we should be able to do it, because we are the one who is paying the premium. Yeah. So at the moment there's a cap on it, saying like it was $10,000 last year, and this year they said they will make it to $15,000, which is like it's still for someone's life. It's like nothing to support the rest of the family for after the person passes away. So that cap needs to be either increased significantly or just like has no cap at all for the mountain workers. They have to make that exception.
Right. Malika.
The company is allowed to decide themselves, rather than government. I agree with you fully, The government should not put a camp on that,
Okay. Malika.
And it sounds like our community is also agreeing online. Alan, I want to bring you in here because aside from insurance, others are talking about compensation. Jason tweets in that Everest is essentially a Wild West, referring to the western part of the United States. Regulation and policing could help prevent climbers from taking unnecessary risks. And so he says, as a suggestion, the climbing fee, though it's already steep, is critical. It weeds out amateurs and directly benefits local Sherpas. So could increasing the climbing fee lead to better compensation for local guides?
Only if it gets funneled back to the into the Khumbu, into the people doing the real work. Historically, those fees have been taken up within the government, and they haven't gone to the people doing the real work. Another way of looking at this is that an average climbing Sherpa who's actually actually
Can
climbing.
I interrupt?
No, just
Yeah.
let Alan finish his sentence first of all, and then I'll come back to you, Ankila. Go ahead, Alan, because I'm just hanging on that last sentence you were about to do.
But they'll make about, let's just, on average, $6,000 US. And if you're someone in your 20s, and let's say that you do have 20 years of serving as a guide, that's $120,000 that you would bring into your family. That allows you to send your kids to school in Kathmandu, perhaps build tea houses. And I completely agree with what's being said, that a $5,000 to $10,000 insurance policy on a lifetime income just in those 2 months, working just 2 months a year, is over $100,000 is just crazy. And if you look at it from a Western perspective, putting a cap on life insurance, that doesn't happen elsewhere. So, there's lots of changes that need to be made. But first and foremost is that if you do increase the permit fee, that's probably going to attract only richer climbers. And
How much
I hate
is,
to say this,
Alan, I've got 4 minutes left, so I'm just going to ask you very quickly, how
Yeah.
much does it cost you to even get onto the mountain?
this year for 2014, it was an average of $42,000.
Whoa.
But it ranged from 30 to 90, but the average,
Wow.
the median price that a Westerner paid was $42,000.
Wow, so Sumit, you're a rich person, right? 42,000? You're walking away with a lot of money. How much of that would you actually get yourself or Pemba?
As a guide or
Yeah, as a guide. How much of that 42,000 would get to the guide?
One thing that the Western media is saying is they're putting the number on the exact number on how much the Sherpa is getting paid, but that's not even average. There's a lot of the companies or a lot of the employer paying a lot less than that, and that's something also we need to address for the future. Everybody's saying, okay, in average, the Everest climbers are getting paid $5,000, but that's not the case, because there are more than 50% of workers in Everest gets less than that. You agree with me, Pemba, on this, right?
Pemba, how much money? I obviously,
Yeah, but
I don't want to tell you exactly how much money, but what a proportion of that do you get?
It depends on the conditions, depends on the company, depends on the people, depends on the guides and clients. Because still we have a big problem because we don't have a standard benchmark for the Mount Everest climbing business. How much we need to pay for the local guide, how much we need to pay the experienced guide, how much we need to pay the supporter staff, how much we need to pay for the porters. There's no standard benchmark.
Right.
That is the big problem.
And that's the challenge as well.
So now we are always talking.
Sure, and there's no standard.
Some clients, even some clients they paid $100,000. The local guide they can sufficient remunerations.
Wow, it's a real business. Yankila, I know you had something to add. I'm going to ask you to be very brief because I'm wrapping up the show.
Yeah. Now, in the coming years, after these big incidents, we are all getting conscious about the fact that the payment to the Sherpa climbers should be much better, and provisions should be made so that in case such an accident happen and the Sherpa has to lose his life, that his families have a sustainable livelihood mechanisms in place.
Okay.
There has to be a system. And right now, a climbers' welfare fund is being established. The government has announced this. We hope this comes into action as quickly as possible. And during my time when I was in the government, I was the first person actually to take the 30% of the royalty earned by Mount Everest back to the Solukhumbu district. I personally took it over there to bring into action what the government had, people in the government and the politicians had been promising for a long time.
Okay,
So
I'm going to leave the conversation there. So Yankila, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. Also to Pemba, Pasang, Alan and Sumit. This conversation will go on the ground and also online as well. Malika.
Last word I'll give to Will on Twitter, who says Everest belongs to all of us, but it's in the custody of Nepal's Sherpas. Hence, we should put their safety first in all of this.
So, we will move on to tomorrow's program. Tomorrow, we meet 4 journalists who work in places that are so dangerous that every time they do a story, it could be their last one. They join us to share their experiences and why they choose to do it. Until then, see you online. Take care.